Okay, hi everyone, this is the story of Hannibal at the Gates of Rome. It's Livy number 78. As always, take a look at this, pause it, press on. Postero die transgressus anienem, Hannibal in aciem omnes copias eduxit. First sentence, on the next day, having crossed the river Anio, postero die, time when ablative, we've met this countless times, time when ablative, transgressus there is a P, perfect active participle. So, on the next day, having crossed, remember all those gress words, ingressus, egressus, they're all obviously perfect active participles because they're deponent verbs. So, having crossed the Anio, the river Anio, Hannibal, eduxit, led all of his troops, find your object, omnes copias, all of his troops into the battle line. Nec flacus consulesque certamen detrectabere instructis utrimque exercitibus imberingens grandine mixtus ita utramque aciem turbavit ut vix armis retentis in castra sese receperint. You'll notice I said castra. I reckon that in our books it says casta, which, unless they were entering into chastity, which I don't think they are, it's going to be castra, and there's a misprint and they've left out the R. So, this part. And Flaccus and the consuls did not nec detractabere, did not shrink back from the certamen, from the struggle. We've got a historic infinitive there for the detractabere. So they did not shrink back from the fight. And with their instructis exercitibus, notice those is endings, and I reckon you're going to be dealing with an ablative absolute, and of course we are. So, and with their battle lines having been drawn up on each side, and imber ingens, a huge rain cloud, mixtus, having been mixed, perfect passive participle, with grandine, with hail, turbavit, disturbed, the aciem, the battle line, or sorry, utram aciem, each battle line, ita, in such a way, as soon as I see this word, ita, I'm going to look for a subjunctive, which I can find here, that relatively rare form of the perfect subjunctive. So, stirred up the battle line in such a way that weeks armis, scarcely having held on to their onto their armies, onto their weapons, they receperint. So, stirred them up in such a way that they retired, that they retreated into their camp. So, we've got there this perfect infinitive form, which linked with this is because of it being a result clause in such a way that. Next sentence. Et postero die eodem loco acies instructas eadem tempestas diremit ubi recepissent se in castra mira serentas cum tranquillate oriebatur. And on the next day, let's find our subject. Eadem tempestas, that looks to me like a nominative. A similar storm, diremit, find your main verb. Separated, now find your object, the acies instructas, the battle lines having been drawn up in the eodem loco, in the same place. Would have been better if I'd done those in different colours, would have looked fancier. So, and on the next day, find the subject, eadem tempestas, a similar storm, diremit, separated, the battle lines that have been drawn up in the eodem, in the same place. Ubi recepissent, when they had retreated into their camp. Mira serenitas, an amazing calm, now this is a calmness of weather. Oriebatur, deponent verb, was rising up with gentleness, with peace. So, it's basically an amazing calm weather, calm climate, was rising with peace. That's in peacefulness of the weather, I suppose. In religionem eares apud poenos versa est. Minuere etiam spem eos duae aliae parva magna quae res. That eares, that event, let's make sure that again we find our subject, find our verbs, find our object. That event was versa est, was regarded in religionem as an omen apud poenos, amongst the Carthaginians. Minuere, we're dealing again with a historic infinitive here. Then, we need to find our subject first though. So, duae aliae, two others, then minuere, threatened, historic infinitive, two others then threatened his spem and threatened his hope. Find your subject, find your verb, find your object. One parwa, one large, one small, or in this case, I'm sorry, one small and one large. So two other matters, alia here referring to the res, two other matters also threatened his hope, his ambition, one small and large, or small and large. Next is magna illa quod cum ipse ad moenia urbis Romanae armatus seret milites in supplementum Hispaniae profectos audit. The large one, illa magna, that large one, because cum ipse, cum, look for a subjunctive, there we go, sederet, cum sederet, going to be a temporal clause. So, when he himself was sitting, armatus, perfect passive participle, was sitting armed at the walls of the city of Rome, of the Roman city, audit, he heard, so verbs of here, saying, thinking, I suppose here, he heard soldiers, profectos, having set out, or he heard that his soldiers, or he heard that soldiers had set out in supplementum as reinforcements for Spain. So here it's almost, I suppose you could say, indirect statement. He heard, except we haven't got the infinitive here, but he heard that soldiers had set out in as reinforcements for Spain. So that's the large one. It's going to upset him. The small one then. However, the small one, and even though this is small, it's grammatically larger, i.e. more difficult. So take your time with this bit and figure out what goes with what. So, parva autem. The small one, however, because cognitum here is the cognitum est. Cognitum est. It was learned, ex quodam, it was learned from a certain captive. So start off with that bit, I reckon. However, the small one was because it was learned, which was these blue bits here. It was learned. Sorry, first of all, the cognitum est, it was learned. And then from the blue bits, it was learned from a certain captive. And then we are going to need to figure out what was learned. And here, it's actually going to be, imagine as always, it was said from a certain captive. As soon as we have the it was said, we're looking for an accusative, looking for an infinitive, looking for an indirect statement. However, the small one was because it was learned from a certain captive that, let's look for our accusative, that the agrum, that the field, in quo, that the field in which he himself, haberet, had his camp. Haberet, why is that subjunctive? Because it is a subordinate clause within indirect speech, within the indirect statement. Therefore, it's oratio obliqua. If you remember, we said that a subordinate clause within indirect speech goes into the subjunctive. The verb goes in the subjunctive, oratio obliqua. The small one was because it was learned from a certain captive that the field, venisse, agrum venisse, that the field had been, those two go together, the field in which he himself had his camp, per eos dies, for those days, venisse, had been sold from venio, as we say here, I am being sold, that it had been sold, forte, in which he by chance had his camp, had been sold, nihil, and not at all, for a discounted price. So I suppose it's shown here the confidence that the Romans felt they were going to be able to get rid of Hannibal. And that's him. Id vero adeo superbum atque indignum visum ut exemplo vocato praecone, tabernas argentarias quae circum forum Romanum essent jusserit venere. Get ready for another oratio obliqua here. So the next bit. Indeed, vero, id, that visum seemed superbum atque indignum. That seemed arrogant and unworthy, adeo, to such an extent, adeo, as soon as we see this word adeo, we are hopefully thinking to ourselves, where might that subjunctive be? And we would find it here. So, that seemed arrogant and unworthy to such an extent that, as an example, having called an auctioneer, with an auctioneer, look at those endings, the Quadcore, Quadcore, ne, ablative absolute, so that, with the auctioneer having been called, but as we said, we're now much better than that, so we'll just say, having called the auctioneer, he jusserit, and it's again a perfect subjunctive because it is linked with the adeo. It was arrogant to such an extent that he ordered the tabernas argentarias, that he ordered the banker's stalls, quae, which were around. So again, why is essent in the subjunctive? Because it is oratio obliqua. I'm not going to even try and write this terrible way of doing it. I really need to get one of those snazzy pens that you can write on this with. So, that he ordered the banker's stalls, which were around the forum, or around the Roman forum, to be sold. So we have there oratio obliqua, we have there a result clause. Yes, next bit. His motus ad tutiam fluvium castrare tulit, sex milia passum ab. Nice easy end to it. Moved, perfect passive participle, his, by these matters, by these events. Retulit, he brought his camp back to the, or his castra retulit, he brought his camp back to the river Tutia, 6 miles from the city. Well done, that was quite a difficult one in parts. Have a nice day, have a nice holidays. I'm going to watch some American football.